My guess is that there will be a move to centers like Dubai, centers like Moscow, centers like Shanghai, or this new BRICS metals exchange, ultimately, which will define the price.
They now have to keep printing or we crash.
We've got this ticking time bomb.
Talking gold with the one and only Andrew Maguire.
Welcome to Live from the Vault.
Welcome to Live from the Vault, brought to you by Kinesis Money. Now, this is the show that goes beyond the headlines to uncover the truth about the gold and silver markets with world-renowned whistleblower and industry expert Andrew Maguire. Now, this week, we'll be joined here by a special guest, Andy Schectman from Miles Franklin. And you know what? To learn more about Andy, we're going to leave a link right there below in the description. So let's head over to the UK and find out what's happening. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Andy, for joining us again. The last time you and I spoke, I was privileged to come on your show, Little by Little, which is an excellent show, which I think people should check out if they haven't so far.
You're too kind, brother. I appreciate you. It's good to be here, and always a pleasure to drop in the vault. Looking forward to it.
Oh, God, there's so much to talk about. My goodness, you and I, when we get going. So we're going to try and fit this into, into a 45 minutes or whatever. But anyway, Look, can we start with, because there are people, I mean, most people know you, but there are people that don't. And it's so important people understand your Miles Franklin journey, the importance of that and what it means. Because what I will say, and I'll open by saying, Andy, if there's anyone in the world I can count on with one hand that has undoubted integrity, it's you, my friend. So Miles Franklin journey, please let us know.
That's maybe one of the nicest things I've ever heard in this industry, and I appreciate that sincerely, Andrew. And I echo the same thing. And really, in my estimation, integrity and honesty and transparency is all that matters in running a business. You don't even need to know what product you're selling if you're an honest, transparent person that understands integrity and what it's all about. And I appreciate that. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but what I have done throughout my life, whether it be in athletics where I've had great success or in finance, in business, is by outworking people. First to the ballpark, first to the gym, last to leave. And same thing here, 3, 4, 5 hours a day, every day, 7 days a week, trying to keep up with guys like you with information that seems to be ever flowing and ever fluid. And if you take a day or two off, it feels like you've taken a month off. I started in this industry when I was 19 years old, almost 20, with my father on a wing and a prayer in an office the size of a closet. My parents sold their life insurance policies and borrowed $60,000 from my dad's best friend from high school, whose middle name was Franklin. Obviously, my dad's middle name was Miles. And somehow, some way, 35 years later and 12 billion in sales underneath us without a customer complaint, here we are. I learned a very valuable lesson, Andrew, along the way that shapes the way that I look at gold and silver. And I think it, on many levels, was the greatest gift I've ever been given, not only to properly, I believe, look at gold and silver as wealth. That has outlived, 2 world wars, German hyperinflation, the Great Depression, every pandemic, everything the world's ever thrown at it. But more importantly, I learned the laws of compounding and how to make it my friend rather than, as most people do, find they are constantly dealing with the wrong side of the laws of compounding. In other words, my father told me at a very young age when we started the company, he would not let me make the same mistakes that he did. And that the only rule that he would employ or I would be fired would be to every 2 weeks when we get paid, buy something, whether it be an ounce of silver or anything precious metals, period. That's it. Only rule. Cool, I said. I can deal with that, Dad. And albeit I've owned the company for over almost 2 decades on my own, and I still talk to him every day. He won't fire me. We maintain this very close relationship where he's kind of like my consigliere. Did I pronounce that right? I think it's close. You know what I'm trying to say. He's my sounding board. And I bought something every 2 weeks for for 35 years. I've never missed a 2-week period since 1990, let's just say, ever. And it was the greatest gift I've ever been given, to understand the laws of compounding and to understand what gold and silver are. They're wealth, period. You don't buy it to become wealthy. You own enough of it, you will be wealthy. But everything that I think about when I talk about gold and silver, whether it be the central banks accumulating it, whether it be the United States becoming net importers of it, whether it be the BRICS embracing it, or whether I'm talking to someone here in my business about the virtues of owning it, to me, it is not an investment that you buy to become wealthy. It is wealth that, going back to biblical times where it was mentioned 400 times in the Bible, it is wealth. And that is maybe the greatest gift I've ever been given. In fact, undoubtedly is the greatest gift I've ever been given, to understand the laws of compounding, to understand paying yourself first, and understand what gold and silver mean in a historical sense. So anything that we talk about here today, Andrew, that's the light that I would like it framed in, and is that it's wealth, and everything else, as JP Morgan once said, is just credit. So that's the history. That's where we are. I pinch myself every day and wonder how the hell we made it here 35 years later. Life is crazy that way, I guess,
Very salient comment there. And I think that, I think you're doing what your clients, that what you say to your clients would be the smart thing to do, which is basically that if they just copied you, they're going to be very successful. Now we're in the final stages of, this is especially salient because we're in the final stages of a debt cycle, which, historically, and you talk about history, and you can go back as far as you want here, 5,000 years if you want. But but as far as recent history is concerned, has driven gold to previously unfactored highs. Now, what was interesting, I saw Jan Nieuwenhuis just published a very, very compelling argument that gold could.
I think he's one of the best in the industry. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'd like to give him his due. He's really good.
Absolutely. And I was really taken with his argument that gold could equalize at $16,000. Now, this is not a guy that jumps. He's not a shyster. He's not a guy trying to sell anything. What he's doing is analyzing it based on history. Really, gold could equalize $16,000 an ounce. And he says, well, he sort of couches that with, well, my estimation for a long time has been $8,000 at the end of the decade. But and personally, I'm on record saying 4,500 by the end of the fourth quarter of this year. But that's based purely on supply demand fundamentals. So we've got this range of people coming through from different aspects. Andy, your thoughts?
I think that picking a number is very challenging. Of course, you have Goldman Sachs saying as high as $4,500. You have other mainstream pundits saying 3,700 to 4,000 in that range, talking about gold reaching a level, in the thousands of dollars higher than where we are right now, is not that outlandish. First of all, if we were to look at the United States becoming a net importer of gold, I don't ever remember it being a net importer of gold. There were 1 or 2 years where we did have net imports, but not like we are seeing now, where, more gold has been imported to the United States since January than at any time since the end of World War II, when we took over for the pound sterling at the Bretton Woods Agreement. Everyone sent us their gold. Something big is happening with gold. And of course, you see Trump's a tweet the other day on Easter Sunday. He says, the golden rule of negotiating success, he who has the gold makes the rules. Thank you. You see talk of revaluing gold, which was held in the gold revaluation account. That's actually the name of it, which you can't make up, whether it be the head of the Bundesbank or the Dutch National Bank, or members of the governing board of the Bundesbank, or Senator Loomis from Wyoming, all talking of gold revaluation. Whether we talk of Judy Shelton, Trump's former nominee to run the Fed in 2016, who advocates for 50-year treasuries backed by gold, or the Treasury Secretary currently of the United States, who largest holding was gold while running a hedge fund, and is prior to becoming the Treasury Secretary, and is a self-proclaimed gold bug. There's so many things happening that make you wonder and think. Now, to Jan's point, it would certainly benefit the United States and all the central banks to see gold revalued to a much higher level, whether it be by the market slowly, as we've seen, slow and steady, tremendous appreciation that's gone unnoticed by the mainstream, which is really shocking to me, which tells me we're still very early in the game, or something more dramatic where, they come in and revalue gold. Every $4,000 increase in the price of gold gives the Treasury General account $1 trillion free and clear. So, you see gold at levels of, 4,000, 8,000, 12,000, whatever that number is, at $12,000 an ounce. And I think that's the number that James Rickards came up with. You're giving $3 trillion free and clear to the Treasury General account. I did a little bit of math myself after watching a great video by Mike Maloney the other day where he talked about gold being revalued. Sorry about that. Sorry. In any case, so Mike Maloney's video talked about when gold was backing the currency prior to 33 over my shoulder there, it was just backing M1, which is the notes in circulation. M2 is a broader measure of the money supply. They got rid of M3. They said it was archaic. So currently the broadest measure that we have access to is M2. And that's largely credit. It's 92% credit. So when you look at your bank account and you see $50,000 in there, that's credit. That's M2. The bank owes you the notes. They promise to pay it to you. But M1 is the currency in circulation. M2 is only 8% currency, 92% credit. So when gold was backing the dollar prior to 33, it was backing M1. If you take M1 right now, 2,365 billion and divide it by the 261 million ounces we supposedly have, you get $9,044 an ounce. Could that happen? Yeah, why not? I mean, why not? Why not revalue gold to a level high enough to start to whittle down the debt and benefit the central banks on the planet who, for the last, really since 2017, have been on a binge buying and repatriating, and largely because of many of the things that you've talked about for years that enlightened me, namely the reclassification of gold, the tier 1 status, and the importance of owning an asset that has no counterparty risk. The way that the mechanism works, in essence, is if you had gold at $8,000 an ounce, the Treasury would issue gold certificates to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve would, in essence, just create that money and give it to the Treasury General account. They now would have, at 8,000, they would have $2 trillion free and clear to do with as they see fit. Those certificates do not give the Federal Reserve access or a call on the nation's gold. It's the fiat equivalent of it. So it's kind of an accounting gimmick, to say the least. So I guess I would just simply say this. Something is very different with gold. There is no question about it. When you see the massive amounts of gold imports into the country, when you see the massive amounts of imports to the BRICS nations, the continual drive to repatriate and accumulate gold on all levels, using all different techniques, even flying around the world, as China is doing, buying doré and concentrate to disintermediate the marketplace. You got the largest producer of gold in the world and the second largest producer of silver flying around the world buying doré and concentrate, so no one knows what they're doing. There's a push, I believe, to reintegrate gold, Andrew, into the monetary system. And that's why it's slowly bubbling higher. The volatility keeps people at bay. The volatility keeps the mainstreams, or the normies, as Cliff High calls them, out of the market. But yet it's slowly revaluing and being reintegrated, I believe, into the system rather than reacting to something where it just shoots up. It's the old frog in the pot of lukewarm water that the heat's slowly being turned up. So the question to me really is, how high does it go on its own? And will they, in essence, choose to revalue it the way that Roosevelt did in 33 and the way that Nixon did in 71 or 72 and 73? After he closed the gold window in 71, he did revalue gold the next year by about 7 or 8% by devaluing the dollar and pushing gold from 35 to 38. And then in 73 from 38 to 42.22. Gold revaluation is not a new phenomenon. And who would it benefit? Well, it would benefit all the central banks. So I think numbers higher than most people would consider to be prudent to say publicly is realistic.
Now, I've just done an episode, and what we're doing right now is going to be released next Friday, so it's not time sensitive, but generally speaking, what we're looking at is what I've had so many questions is, what happened? What happened? How come we get a $360 round trip? And I just think it provided us a perfect example of how this game works. And so really basically, it's simple. And it's really, really simple. As far as the FX markets are concerned, all the bullion banks, all the liquidity providers that provide liquidity to the foreign exchange gold market must be fully Basel III compliant. There's a 0% weighting. They have the bullion. If they call for it, they have to have it. Why? Because when we had shortages in COVID, these too big to fail, insured banks were in a process of where they're asymmetrically imbalanced trades, where they had a spot position, which is technically deliverable, versus a very, very asymmetrically imbalanced futures position. Suddenly, the futures market went bid only. Now, these guys, if they hadn't been bailed out, that was it. That's what brought Basel III compliance in, because it's a multi-trillion-dollar marketplace. People don't realize how big the FX gold market is and where it extends globally. So a lot of the US guys, they're so siloed into looking at a futures market. And what's happened is these clever guys, what they've done is they've gone, you know what, we got a footprint in that market, in the FX market. Hey, we've also got a footprint in the COMEX market. Guess what? Let's apply a big haircut to these guys. They can't consider gold to be a first-tier asset. It's a high-quality liquid asset, as with every other commodity, but it's got a haircut. They can put it on your 85% to value it on your balance sheet. Well, of course, that creates the problem. So you've now got a foot in both markets. Now you have the tool, because each and every one of these speculators, and a lot of them, jumped on board. Bearing in mind that we had a UK holiday, no fixes on the Thursday, shut everything down. What happened was it shoots up purely on COMEX volume. Now, I'm sure China's gaming it, but up it goes. Tops out at 3,500 and a big 360, and we're back to exactly where we were before that rally. Why? Because we've now actually ejected, or they have ejected all this froth. Now, so people need to understand that when they look and go, oh my God, everything has gone down. And then you've got the Fed or the insiders saying, oh, look, we've got a problem. Technically, it could go down a lot more. You know what? This is the game that you and I know so well. But I think it was just time. I used this last episode, I just did, to really explain, look at what happened. It's just simply that simple. So whereas the bullion banks have to have the bullion on tap, and so if I'm a central bank and I buy a foreign exchange gold and I buy it at a fix, it's mine. T+1, it's mine. I take it away. Now, if by chance the COMEX does not go Basel III compliant on the 1st of July, what am I going to do? I am going to come in, buy EFP using the Achilles heel of the COMEX. I'm going to buy that sucker at a discount into the T+1 market, and I take it out, and guess what? The COMEX blows up. So it has to. And this is why a lot of people have been out there saying, oh, we're not really, Basel III compliant, but it will be. And what's your thoughts on that?
Well, we've seen tremendous inflows into COMEX, which lends me to believe that they understand exactly what you're saying. It's if you took the entire eligible category and applied it to the open interest or to it's almost 1-to-1. It's close. It's about 90%. Now that all of that eligible is not for sale at these prices. but it's getting closer. It's as if they're preparing for exactly what you're talking about. And to me, I see greater instability, or the Achilles heel to me. And maybe, you're probably the person who's more inclined to answer that. But to me, I see greater threats in the London market, where the leverage is far greater, where I don't know if they've fixed their problem with the lack of trucks, the Bank of England, but that T+1 that you speak of, has been pushed all the way out to T+8 weeks. Now, I don't know if that's getting any better, but to me, it just seems as though that this current administration is wise to exactly what you're talking about, and says this is a problem. We need to fix it. When you see the inflows into COMEX, it is no coincidence they're the largest ever, and almost getting that one-to-one relationship with obligations. So, I guess if I had to say to me where the real risk is, it's in the OTA market in London, where there would be a failure to deliver. It just seems as though that what's happening on COMEX, someone has tipped them to saying, you better get your house in order quickly. And at the current rates that they're bringing gold in, by July 1st, they ought to be fully compliant. At least that's the way it looks to me. I'd be interested to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, really, it boils down to the major difference really between how the West, historically, Western cash settled, heavily leveraged COMEX futures market discovers the prices versus Chinese and all the BRICS facing exchanges, which actually novel requires a physical bar to be first purchased, assigned, and then if I want to put that bar up for sale, I have to own it first. Well, what a difference. I'm not riding. If you've got 4% in the game just to track the price, you don't have skin in the game. And so really, I mean, these guys are so clever because they know the game. They know when the OCC bets are going to get marked to market. They know when the wrong-footed options positions are coming out, are going to be marked to market. And why would you chase it? You just don't chase it. You just alchemize it. You take it. You soak it up. And what's happening is a real supply-demand physical settlement price is being determined. And there are no haircuts to that.
Well, and I think that will happen. And there's talk of the BRICS metals exchange. But, and I think you'll agree, what's different over the last several years at any time I've been watching the markets is the delivery. Is that most contracts usually never stood for delivery. We didn't see much in the way of delivery, and maybe 1% of contracts or so. And that really, since 2020, that number has exploded higher and continues to go higher around the globe. But last year or the year before, the BRICS talked about the BRICS grain exchange, which is something that is in development right now. And the fellow that's running it came out and said something very interesting as far as I'm concerned. And he said, the countries in the BRICS nations produce and accumulate and consume more wheat than they do in the West. But we can't control the price, he says, because that's controlled on COMEX. And with the development of the BRICS grain exchange, that will change. Now, if you don't think they understand that about the metals exchanges, I got a bridge to sell you. And they do understand this. And so this has been a methodical, slow bleed down. And a lot of people in the West have a hard time understanding why they just don't throw the kitchen sink at it and buy everything that they possibly could. But it doesn't work that way. The whole system would just implode. So instead, they have been slowly and methodically draining the system and bleeding it down, and understand that the pricing is controlled on COMEX, where in the snap of a finger, they can make oil -40 a barrel. Well, that's the futures market controlling the physical market, and that's not the way it's supposed to be. My guess is that there will be a move to centers like Dubai, centers like Moscow, centers like Shanghai, or this new BRICS metals exchange, ultimately, which will define the price. And I think the West is being exposed for what it truly is, a system that, is controlled by a handful of Western bankers, and it doesn't do any favors to not only the folks that accumulate, commodities and understand what they are, but even more so to the folks that produce them and distribute them. And my guess is that, look, you can only manipulate a market over an extended period of time, as we've seen, by pushing it in the direction that it is going. For many years, no one wanted gold and silver. That's changed. I really do believe that metals are now being looked at very differently as the foundation of solid, stable money free from counterparty risk. And that carries a lot of weight. And I think that is a trend we are moving into. And to try and hold back this global tsunami of demand is as stupid as a mud wall. It represents an existential threat to a lot of these banks, a lot of these funds that have chosen to go naked short. And if they were smart, they would do all they could to pull themselves out. I think some of them are. But yeah, I think real price discovery is something we really haven't even experienced yet. And when it moves to a cash settlement where you T+1, like in Shanghai, like it's supposed to be in London, where you pay your money and you get your metal and off you go, that's going to change things very dramatically. It seems as though we're moving in that direction. And it seems as though, as much as I have a hard time even saying it, that the folks on COMEX understand this and are moving to clean up, if you will, the mess that they've made for all of these years, because very, very quickly, this can turn pear-shaped if you see a large group of entities stand for delivery and they're not able to come up with the metal. Everything immediately blows up, kind of to your point. So yeah, I would like to hope that the Trump administration has gotten wise to this, and that moves are being made to kind of get the house in order leading up to July 1st.
Yeah, and it's interesting reading between the lines, because I think, there's been a lot of threats, and the BRICS meet right on the 1st of July. I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence, but all of these things seem to concatenate at once. I think Trump, when they were talking about 150%, you don't use the dollar, 150% tariffs on globally along all BRICS members. But hang on. And he says, one phone call and they'll be back on the dollar. Well, come on, Andy, with the dollar already weaponized against China, Russia, Iran, given the sudden expansion of tariffs, meaning sanctions. And these nations actually control the lion's share of all global commodities. They control 85%. They either consume or produce 85% of all commodities. I don't see how the US actually has that leverage over China. And I think really one of the things that really, and you talk about BRICS, and we've got a really strong contact in Russia. And we talked about Klasnev's gold-backed stablecoin. Well, on the back of the RMB as being connected now, as we know, PBC announced it's connected to 10 Asian, 6 Middle Eastern countries. They've already facilitated 38% of global trade, which is able to already bypass the weaponized SWIFT system. And really, we're talking about 200 countries have already adopted the digital RMB. Now, obviously, there are limitations to that, but add in, and we're talking about a 7-second settlement process. And so while the scope of this RMB settlement is limited, clearly, because people say, well, the first thing you say is, yeah, but I mean, hey, but add in the digitized version of Klasnev's gold-backed stablecoin as a 7-second ruble settlement currency, and you combine these two things, we're talking about a massive de-dollarization move, which I don't think the US will have to. They'll have to become friends. They'll have to make alliances. You can't fight that.
Yeah, you stole a lot of my thunder there, and you're right. That is the Enbridge system. I mean, that is the technology that had been yanked at the 12th hour by the BIS, saying that they couldn't work with a country that was being sanctioned by the West, just realizing that Russia was the R in BRICS after 4 years of developing at the BIS Innovation Hub along with China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the UAE. And you're right. It is a 7-second settlement instead of the 3 to 5 days associated with SWIFT. It disintermediates all SWIFT interaction, and it is about 40% of global trade right now. But it gets a lot deeper than that. And something just came out that I think is huge news, that even guys like you and I, who have been the first to talk about the BRICS, the first to talk about gold being revalued, a lot of the things that you and I have talked about, I think you and I were the first, going back 4 years talking about this stuff. And I think even you and I didn't see this coming. At least I didn't. I don't know about you, but they're smart. I'll give them credit. They're really smart, because what you just said when you tried to explain the 38, but that's what they all say. Yeah, but, it doesn't amount to anything. So listen to this. The next meeting, the big one, is in Rio de Janeiro in July, as you were saying. But the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, just came out with something that is massive. Now, before I mention it, think about this. What led me on to the BRICS originally was the Belt Road, right? The Chinese Belt Road Initiative is the largest infrastructure project in human history. And it connects roughly 75% of human population right now, 50% of global GDP right now. These are underdeveloped countries that are resource rich, and they're being connected by maritime channels and bridges and roads and railways and whatnot, to be patrolled only by military and commerce. And it is a new way to, in essence, trade globally through China, Asia, Africa, South America, and parts of Europe. And what's really interesting about this is that the majority of these countries, while very much aligned with BRICS, are not in the BRICS. Now, you could say the same thing about the Eurasian Economic Union, a huge group of countries. Most of them end in the word stand, but in terms of population and GDP and military might, I mean, it's a significant entity, and only second to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is the largest regional military and financial organization on the planet. These countries are not in the BRICS, albeit aligned with them. And in fact, the president of Belarus was calling for a summit last year to bring the Eurasian Economic Union and the Shanghai Cooperation into the BRICS. Never happened. But the point I'm trying to make is this. You got the BRICS, but then you got the Belt Road, which is already the majority of human population, the Shanghai Cooperation, the Eurasian Economic Union. You put it together with the BRICS, you're now at 90% of human population. You're at the majority of global GDP, 3 of the 4 largest nuclear arsenals on the planet, the majority of all the trade routes on sea and on land, the majority of all of the production and mining of the rare earths, of the precious metals, of all of the commodities, almost 100% of the refining of the rare earths. China is the engine of manufacturing. You got all of this stuff together, and Lavrov comes out and says that they say that the summit chair in Brazil has proposed a new BRICS payment platform for both member and non-member countries. This system would be independent of SWIFT, the US dollar, the euro, and the British pound. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov emphasized that it will be open to non-member nations. Really? Now you put it together with all of these groups that are aligned with the BRICS in China, in particular, the Belt Road, Eurasian Economic Union, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, 90% of human population, and bang, you just open it up to all of them. Here you go. We will settle in local currencies, cross the bridge, no SWIFT interference, and we will settle any imbalances in gold until they initiate what Dilma Rousseff, the former president of Brazil and the head of the New Development Bank, said they've agreed upon into principle. The unit, 40% gold-backed, redeemable to central and commercial banks upon demand. The point of it is that it's one thing when we talk about the BRICS and their growing union. It's another thing when we talk about all the countries aligned with, philosophically, economically, etc., with these nations that now have the ability to trade with these nations in their own currencies, which helps develop their own ecosystem, develops their own economies, strengthens their economies instead of being reliant upon a strong dollar, which is very difficult when you're dealing with having to first convert to a strong dollar for these nations. So yeah, this is a huge deal as far as I'm concerned, and it's gone largely unnoticed by the pundits. To me, it's one of the biggest deals I've seen yet regarding the BRICS, and no one's talking about it. It's very quiet. And that's the Western media for you. No one really wants to give them any credibility. But this is the little by little by little moment where you wake up one morning and go, oh my God, the majority of human population now really doesn't have to trade on SWIFT any longer. And when you talk about Trump saying, well, I'm going to give you 150% tariff, bullshit, that's not a tariff. That is a sanction pretending to be a tariff. This is what brings all these countries together. And it's this type of behavior, along with the fact you now have Doge more or less giving up. You got Elon Musk going back to being a civilian, and you got Congress not doing what they said they would do. And if I were the rest of the world, I'd say, look, even under the spotlight of an administration that is calling out the fraud and corruption, you can't get them to do anything about it. They just signed a $1 trillion military spending bill. That's all discretionary. That's borrowed money. We have $6 trillion coming due this next month in May. $6 trillion in treasuries that come due, and $28 trillion by 2028, with only $15 trillion if we're lucky in tax revenue. Well, we're halfway there, and that doesn't account for all the deficit spending over the next 3 years. So we're broke, we're insolvent, we're going around the world with the stick and sanctions rather than the olive branch, and let's make this work. And then we can't get our house in order. And even now, under this administration and Doge and public support, Congress is just doing the opposite. So we will never get our house in order. We will never choose austerity over inflation. And you put it all together, what is happening here right underneath our nose? I'm sorry. Anyways, what is happening with BRICS is to me, it's really big. And it's funny because it's been kind of radio silent for a while. And people just are dismissing the BRICS as a non-event because of it. But under the seams, it seems as though they are preparing for something much bigger than I think most people are prepared to understand.
Andy well picked up on that. Obviously that'll fly under the radar for most people. And mainstream, as you say, none of the mainstream media, most commentators not picked up on that. Yes, you've really picked up on that and the implications of that. And this is why it's so important to have these kind of episodes, because this is where you're getting the information. It is big. Obviously, you're not going to get it anywhere else. And I think it's all about education. It's about, okay, now I know that. And maybe I'll make some different decisions on my other investments, or just how I treat, how I deal with my neighbors and my family. But I think what we're seeing here, as you've just outlined, is this started off with China's strategic plan to stick handle the BRICS nations to become the global benchmark price centers for all commodities. And it reveals that the PBOC has literally taken its kid gloves off. It's open now. And along with Russia, they're now in a position to consolidate these BRICS-centric markets. As you've just outlined, it says it all. Well done in actually picking up on that. What I'm sure Lavrov's comment will have slipped under the radar. People go, oh, Russia. Yeah, I'm not interested in anything to do with Russia, which is wrong, but well done. And I think that's excellent information for people who are watching this channel.
Well, I appreciate that. At the same time, you got the IMF comes out and says just last week that the World Economic Order is undergoing currently a major reset. I mean, all of these things together, Andrew, you put them together and it tells me that there is something much bigger in store for gold than the world is prepared to understand or accept. And that's why you see the biggest, smartest money in the world. It's not just that they're the wealthiest, these central banks and sovereign wealth funds, but they're the most well-informed. And to me, that's currency that you can't put a price tag on. Information ahead of the crowd is worth so much. But yet they seem to be dropping crumbs. You know, when Trump says he who has the gold makes the rules. I mean, really? When have you ever heard a president say anything like that? So I don't know. I think this is going to be a very interesting few years, maybe more so in a different way than the last four.
Yeah, and before you revalue gold, if there's any rehypothecation still left, which very likely there is, we only have to connect the OCC FX positions, because they are FX positions, and they're on the OCC report. And you read all the small print, and you can clearly see These are non-balanced Basel III compliant FX positions. So they have to be compliant. So now's the time to repatriate, as you are saying, massive, unprecedented amounts of physical entering the States. It has to be, because if you're going to revalue it, you better make sure it's one-to-one backed. And if it means that we have to have another $200-300 gold price in order to do that, and you rinse a few speculators out along the way, and you can offset some of that liability because they're dumb enough to take the other side of that trade. But all along the way, we've got in the bigger picture. I think what you've described is a multipolar world where fences, barriers have been taken down. This is not what most people in the West don't get. This is that by taking a barrier down between traditional enemies, then deciding to trade together, it's such a synergistically powerful thing that then you have strength through peace. And this is amazing to me. To me, that I'm looking at the social side of this too, because that creates an equality. And gold, you need gold to bring that, because other than that, how do you, all these FX currencies for different nations, how do you value that? Well, probably right now you value each individual FX currency by how much gold does that country have as a percentage of GDP. And so, but then formalize it is what you're saying. You formalize that, those barriers are down. And this is, to me, a very, very, very important side of this discussion.
Yeah, it is for sure. And it's getting closer to home. This is a little bit kind of connecting dots that maybe I'm just trying to find a way to connect them. But about 5 weeks ago, I have a friend who belongs to Trump International Golf Course in West Palm Beach. He brought me golfing there, and Trump was there playing with Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. And it took us about 35 minutes to get into the parking lot because we had Secret Service there, with dogs and the whole 9 yards. And they talk, right? I mean, Trump lives in Florida. They talk, he and DeSantis. And so I think it's interesting that they just passed, it just needs to be signed now by the governor who said he's going to sign it, that gold and silver are now going to be maybe the most comprehensive bill in the country, legal tender in the state of Florida. American gold, Mila, knock it off. I'm so sorry. I can't wait to get my studio so I don't have to deal with this. It's literally every single time I do a show. I'm really sorry.
No worries. He loves the word BRICS.
Yeah, it's every time Anyways, American Gold Eagles qualify as legal tender. The bill recognizes gold and silver coins issued by the U.S. mint with high purity like gold eagles and silver eagles as forms of legal tender within the state. State acceptance is optional. Florida agencies may accept gold and silver for payments like taxes or fees. We're beginning to see states move this way too. Utah and Texas and Wyoming and now Florida, Oklahoma. You're seeing states in the United States embrace gold and silver as legal tender. You're seeing the United States become a massive importer. Gold is tier one. Something's changing, Andrew, with gold and silver. And to me, that's just the bottom line. I mean, that's a name for your thumbnail. Something is changing with gold and silver. There's no question about it. And I can't quite put my finger on it, but you're right. That volatility, that round trip volatility, which seems to continually step up a little higher, but that volatility is enough to make everyone bail. We saw the exact same thing about 4 weeks ago. Gold shot up. It got knocked down $200, shot right back up to 3,500. It gets knocked down and it will climb right back up. I mean, it's the nonsense, numbers like on inflation, where we're supposed to believe that in inflation, the numbers just came out, have cooled down. They haven't cooled down at all. And it's the measurements by which we gauge inflation is nonsense. Or when we talk about silver getting nuked straight through the floor with zero news in the middle at 4 a.m. Eastern time, that's not price discovery. That's price demolition. And it's an algo smash. And again, this is done for effect. And maybe it is done so some of these banks can get their house in order, at least in terms of buying at a muted price in order to, or to knock that funds out, to drop the price, to cover their shorts with physical, to become Basel III compliant. I don't know what it is the volatility doesn't bother me. There's something under the surface, and there's sprinkles of information by the people in the know that tell me this time it's different. I really do believe that it is different, and the world understands it. And fortunately, I do believe this new administration understands it as well.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned about Trump's affinity to gold. I think he made the comment, who has the gold makes the, has the power, basically. Probably not his exact words, but that. But essentially, he must know, or his Secret Service, his corporation must know that China has salted away probably 40,000 tons. Add in, Citizens Gold openly about 25,000 tons, which could be easily brought in on an equitable lease basis in a time of war to back up as a patriotic thing to do, and would be paid back. But essentially, he has to know that all this 400-ounce monetary gold has been vanishing into the general's accounts, into the state-held banks. They know that this has happened. They do know. They couldn't possibly not know. So when he makes a statement like that, I think he seriously, these crumbs that you're talking about, seriously suggest that this repatriation ahead of compliance, because if it doesn't comply, that COMEX is going to explode. Because there's simply, unless you slam down the EFP mechanism, which would force a force majeure anyway, and no CME is not going to let that happen. There's too much vested interest, because if that market goes down, holy smokes, they're going to lose so much credibility. So I think you're right. The crumbs are all there. Repatriate before you revalue. From what you talked about earlier, those numbers, I haven't done those numbers, but they make sense to me. So you could seriously revalue gold.
Yeah, and I mean, my dog is adamant about all of this, as well, as you can tell, and I may be giving her away after this show. I love her.
Bring her in to say hello, because I think that's the solution.
This is who's got the big mouth right here.
Oh my goodness me! You are absolutely fantastic.
She's a wonderful little dog, but she does this every time.
Do you know they're very smart?
Before what's that?
They're very smart, those dogs.
Yeah, they are very smart, and they're great guard dogs, no question. Certainly more bark than bite. But to your point, I just read this morning that the Financial Times reported 70 metric tons, or 7.4 billion so far this month, more than double the previous monthly record, flowed into Chinese gold ETFs. So yeah, the Chinese are wise to this game, and they understand it. And it's not just the states, it's the people as well. Alistair McLeod, your buddy, a few years ago told me that he thought they had 38,000 metric tons, 18 by the people and 20 by the state, which would be 5 times more than the U.S. has. So I'm sure the numbers are far in excess of that by now. But you're right. The Chinese get it. The BRICS get it. Much of the world gets it. And let's just hope the current administration gets it. My dog gets it. You and I get it. Let's hope that the people get it, because this is something that I think is a once in a generation shift, change in monetary policy, a change in thinking. And the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's a full circle coming back to putting gold into the monetary system again. To whatever degree they all do it is debatable, but it's not just a commodity anymore. It's not just an investment. It's far more than that. And I think that is starting to bear fruit.
Well, there's so much to unpack in this episode, guys. I thank you. Andy, thank you so much. Every time you come on, it's just like the light bulbs come on. I'm in my 70s. I feel like I'm 25. This is unbelievable stuff to me. It excites me, because we're witnessing a multipolar world evolving, and through it all, and gold and silver are a component of that. As you say, it's not about wealth. This is about wealth preservation. It's about ultimately, but through it all, we're seeing this multipolar world, and it is with peace, and it will be resolved with peace. And to me, so any kind of, and China, by recently, send a little shot across the bow and said, hey, we don't need I mean, we got a non-nuclear hydrogen bomb, my friends. Don't be worried about anything. So if you turn this into a proxy war, it wouldn't be a good idea. So it's peace through strength on the other side too.
Yes, it is. And hey, I peace anyway. To have peace is good. I had Martin Armstrong the other day, and he says his biggest fear is that there's a false flag event that drags NATO into a war with Russia intentionally. That's not a good thing. And it got 107,000 views in 3 days. Evidently, Martin has quite a following. That's the biggest video I've ever done by a huge margin. And he really does believe that his Socrates system tells him that is his biggest concern. Let's hope that never happens, and that we do see peace, albeit even through strength. That's good by me, but peace for sure. And I love having conversations with you, Andrew. There's no one like you, nobody that I've spoken to in this industry in my entire 35-year career. Not only are you a gentleman, but you're smart and wise beyond your years, and you've taught me a lot as well. So I thank you for letting me come into the vault and my dog, and hopefully we can do it again sometime soon. Like I said, next time we come on, I'll probably be in my new studio a few miles from my house, so not as many interruptions, but it is always a pleasure to be here with you, and keep doing what you're doing. We need you. I need you. I follow everything you do, and certainly I look forward to picking up where we left off again real soon.
Andy, it's raw, it's exciting, it's real. Thank you very, very, very much, and bless you in all your efforts, and bless you for all you do.
You too, my man. Thank you.
All right, thanks for joining us on this episode of Live from the Vault, and a huge thanks to Andrew Maguire and our featured guest, Mr. Andy Schectman, for the cutting through all the noise and sharing insights that you just won't find anywhere else. So if you like this episode, subscribe and turn on that notification so you never miss out. And don't forget to share this episode with someone that you know who needs to hear this real story and all the real stories behind the headlines. And we're back soon again with more hard-hitting truths from inside the precious metal space. And until then, thanks for watching.